So today we're going to have a look at how we multiply decimals together. And yes, I've got Reggie with me to help us and make sure we don't make any mistakes. So there's a few things we need to keep in mind when we're multiplying decimals together. And that's obviously without a calculator. The first thing I like to do is have a look at how many digits in total there are after the decimal point. What that helps us do is work out how many decimal places there should be in our answer at the end. The second thing is I pretend the decimals aren't there and multiply the numbers together. And once I've got that, then that's going to help us determine the final answer. And you might want to set up an algorithm for some of the questions because it might make things easier there. And the third thing is once we have our digits that we think the answer are, we go back to our step one, find the number of decimal places we are meant to have, and put those in the correct spot. So there are our three steps, and we're going to follow those as we go through some examples. Now just remember that we don't always have a zero on the end of the decimal, just in case that a particular question does ask to have a certain number of decimal places. If it doesn't, then zeros on the end of a decimal are not necessary. So let's look at our first example. So our first example, 0.4 times 0.7. If we have a look, we want to follow our step one, find out how many digits there are after the decimal point in total. So we have 1 after a decimal point there, and 1 after a decimal point there. So there are 2 digits after a decimal point in total. And so what that tells us is that our answer should have 2 decimal places. So 2 numbers after the decimal point in total. So 2 numbers after the decimal point in our answer. Okay, now let's ignore the decimals. So 0.4 without the decimal would just be 4, and 0.7 without a decimal is just 7. So we're looking at 4 times 7, and if we know our times tables, 4 sevens are 28. So our answer should have 28 in it. So when we're doing that, we now have to go back to step one and look at how many digits there are after the decimal point in total. So that's our step 3. We go back and have a look at step 1 and step 2 together. And what we now do is we take that 28. We should have 2 numbers after the decimal point. There's 1, 2, so a decimal point should now come in front. And there are no whole numbers, so we can put that 0 in there. And so our final answer of 0.4 times 0.7 is 0.28. So if I'm going a little bit too quick at any stage through these videos, just remember you can pause it, rewind it as we're going through. So let's have a look at our second example, 1.2 times 0.07. So remember our first step, how many digits in total after the decimal point? Well, I've got 1 here and 2 there. So I've got 3 digits in total. So that means our answer should have 3 decimal places at the end. So now ignore the decimals. 12 times 7 is 84. And now our final answer is going to have 8 and 4 in there. So let's put our 84 down, but I've got to have 3 numbers after the decimal point in total. So let's count back. We've got 1, 2, well, I need a third one. So let's put a 0 in. So now I've got 1, 2, 3 have to be after the decimal point. Put our decimal point in, and obviously there's no whole number, so I can put a 0 in there. So what we end up with is 1.2 times 0.07 is 0.084. Okay, so just follow those 3 steps each time, and obviously this is without a calculator, and we'll get the correct answer as long as we know how to multiply correctly. So we'll have a look at another example here. We're going to do 1.5 times 2.4. So if we have a look, we've got 1 number after a decimal point here and 1 digit after a decimal point there. So keeping in mind that I've got 2 numbers after the decimal point, so our answer should have 2 digits after the decimal point at the end. So let's ignore the decimals and write an algorithm. So we're looking at 15 times 24. So this is what our algorithm looks like. So we can do our 4 times 5, put down 0, so 4 5s are 20, carry the 2. 4 1s are 4 plus 2 is 6. So we get 4 lots of 15 is 60. Now we're multiplying by 20, so we need to put down our 0 here. And then 2 lots of 5 is 10, so put down the 0, carry the 1, and I carry it underneath, so I'm now looking at multiplying by this digit. 2 times 1 is 2, plus this extra 1 makes 3. So when we're doing 20 lots of 15, we get 300. And now we just add those together and we get 360. So our final answer is going to have 360 in there. But remember, I've got 2 numbers after the decimal point. So answer should have 2 digits after the decimal point. So we can go 1, 2. So decimal point needs to be placed in between here, and we get 3.60. So 1.5 times 2.4 is 3.60. But do I really need that 0 on the end? No. Okay, so the 0 is not necessary unless we were talking about money or we were talking about rounding something off to 2 decimal places. So answer 1.5 times 2.4 just gives us this 3.6. Alright, so we'll have a look at another example, this time 0.6 times 9. So only one of them is a decimal, but it doesn't matter. We still follow the same process. There's one number after the decimal point. So answer should have one number after the decimal point. Now let's ignore it. 6 times 9 is 54. Remembering I should have one number after the decimal point. So we should have that 4 after the decimal point, put the decimal point in. And so what we get is 0.6 times 9 is just 5.4. Okay, so fairly simple, and the more that you practice, and practice again, the easier it will become and the more that you will remember. So I hope you found this useful, and remember, just keep going and practice and rewind if you need to have a look at anything again. So thank you.